Really, really happy to see that. This is just one of my favorite ministries, so welcome. We seriously are really grateful to have you here. And I am really super excited, and because I'm so excited about these next 4 weeks, Kara gave me the honor of introducing our speaker. And so I'll try to contain. I actually had to write it down because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. What if I forget what I want to say? So 2 years ago, I had the incredible privilege to walk through my calling quilt with our then senior pastor, Dave Rodriguez, here at church during our weekend service. I was in the middle of my, I hope not midlife crisis, but some kind of crisis of trying to figure out what I wanted to be when I grow up. And so I was able to walk through that with him, and it has completely changed the trajectory of my life over the last 2 years. And it wasn't a lightning bolt right there. It's been a slow change, but it's been a complete change in the trajectory of my life. And so for the next 4 weeks, this week, and then 3 weeks after, guys, Dave is going to walk through this with you, and I am so excited about it. Dave has since retired as our senior pastor here and founding pastor here at Grace, and has launched his own company called Destiny Works, where he has walked through with countless numbers of people this destiny calling and discovering their why to live for. And I think it is one of the most important things that we can walk through with people. And so the fact that we get to walk through that with you guys over the next 4 weeks is incredible. So I am going to pray over us, and then I'm going to invite Dave to come up and start this journey with you guys. So, dear Heavenly Father, we invite your Spirit here right now, God, to open up eyes and hearts and souls to what you have called all of us in this room to be and to do. God, I just pray that you would give Dave the words that he needs, that you would give him the sense of the room and give him an extra amount of insight into these women here in the room, God. And I just pray that as these women listen to Dave and walk through this process with him, that you would use this time to show them how much you love them and how intentionally you created them, and that you do have a specific purpose for them, whether it be big or small, but something that is designed to change the world and bring it closer to you, God. And so I just lift this time up to you. I thank you for putting this passion into Dave and for giving him the courage to follow his calling. And I am so grateful for that. We give this to you, God. For it's your name I pray. Amen. Okay, so if you could welcome Dave with me.
Back when I was preaching here, I didn't have to worry about a mask. Anyway, good to see you guys. Glad we could be together and spend the next 4 weeks together. I hope this is helpful for you. And this is what I've been generally doing since May 31st. I think this is my first time actually speaking to people in this building since May 31st. So it's weird and wonderful at the same time. Here's what I really want you to grasp, and you'll see this in the workbook. I'm just going to essentially I want you to essentially walk through the workbook with you over the next 4 weeks. But you were built. I want you to know this. You were built to count. As water is made to run downhill. This is a quote of Dallas Willard in his book, The Divine Conspiracy. You were placed in a specific context, your context, to count in ways that no one else does. That is your destiny. Now, destiny is a gargantuan word. And even the idea of counting or mattering, or even the idea that somebody outside of you placed you where you are in your unique context, I mean, those are such existential issues we struggle with all the time that it's going to take us 4 weeks to unpack that and talk about what destiny really is. But to set up the next 4 weeks, what I'm going to do is give you a bit of an introduction to to the subject and to the topic. And next week, each one of these weeks, we're going to take a piece. Next week, I'll give you your assignment for next week. We'll talk about your life story. And then the week after that, we'll talk about your skill set and your gifts and your passions. And then the final week, we're going to pull it all together. And here's my hope, that you'll walk away at the end of March actually with a little statement that you can hang on to that you think might very well be your calling. So that if somebody said to you, what is your purpose? You'll be able to say, well, I've worked through that. And here's what I think my purpose is. That's my goal at the end of our time, and I hope we get there. And if you have questions along the way, I'll stick around for a while afterwards. I'm happy to answer questions and work through things. And if you go to my website, or you could, everybody has my phone number now, so you can drop me a text or call if you have any questions. All right, let me set this up by, if you opened up your workbooks to the page, I don't know if we have page numbers on here, with the two mountains. Okay? There's that quote at the upper left-hand corner from Dallas Willard. So everyone starts their adult life climbing the first mountain. And the first mountain is about the peak, or what we're trying to achieve when we're young, and for the rest of our lives, is we're trying to discover our identity, first of all. And our identity is we're trying to answer three questions. Who am I? Who do you think I should be? Or who do people say I should be? You know, it's amazing how many people they're living their life based on what they were told they were supposed to be. Either their parents or culture or friends or school. They live their life based on what somebody thinks I should be. That's all part of the trying to achieve your identity. And finally, it's not just who am I, it's not just who do you think I should be, but who are you? And when we're climbing this first mountain, and especially early in our lives, and for a lot of people, they go to their grave comparing themselves with other people, managing their reputation, trying to figure out, okay, who are you? Who am I? Am I meeting up to your expectations, or am I better than you, less than you? So the first mountain is about establishing identity, but it's also establishing or moving towards the American dream. The American dream is simply, I read this morning, Richard Rohr suggests the American dream is about winning and consuming. Winning and consuming. Now, for some people, the American dream is getting the right job, the right home, living in the right place, having a good family. There is this mystical American dream out there, but really what it boils down to is I want to win. I want to achieve what I think a win looks like in life, and then I will consume. That's the first mountain. Now, there's nothing wrong with these two at all. This is part of life, establishing our identity, and living in the United States, we grow up with the idea that there's a dream I need to achieve. Now, inevitably, though, the problem is something happens. Something happens along the way, and we end up with a level of disappointment. And that disappointment, we've been trying to do this, trying to establish our identity, trying to achieve the American dream, and some of the things that disappoint us are failure. Something happens along the way where I blow it, or I make a big mistake and it changes my reputation in the world and I'm now disappointed, or pain. It could be physical pain, emotional pain, relational pain, tragedy. Something happens to us that sends us into this disappointment. Sometimes it's just transitions. This happens a lot when somebody goes through a relational transition. It's like, bam, what's happened? Now I'm disappointed with life, and I've got, either a divorce or even something as simple as, and we'll talk about this in a little while, your children grow up and they go to school. And all of a sudden you're going through a relational transition and you find yourself disoriented in life. And sometimes it's just age. A lot of people, as they get older, they start asking questions about life. One of the things that people, I think Cassie said earlier, she referred to a quarter-life crisis or a midlife. You call it a midlife crisis. Some people have a quarter-life crisis, 25 years old, I don't know who I am. 35, 40, a real midlife crisis, I don't know who I am. And the number of people that I meet that are my age who are in retirement or early retirement asking the question, who am I, is quite amazing. And if a person gets into their 70s and 80s and they're still trying to figure out who they are, it's a real issue in their life. So my point is that usually something happens, and it's kind of a fall off of this first mountain, and you end up in the valley of bewilderment. The valley of bewilderment is a place of deep anxiety. I don't know what to do next, and I don't know how to prosecute my life. I don't know what people many times, if they're not paying attention to their life with this idea of destiny or calling, what they end up thinking when they get here is, I need to reclimb this mountain. And so I need to find I need to kind of rebuild myself. I need to come up with a new identity. Or this is where people say, this marriage isn't working. We're going to get divorced so I can start over again. Or we're going to leave this town and move to another town. Or I'm just going to abandon this career, this job, because so we think the only thing we can do is reclimb this mountain. But there's another choice. And that's to begin to climb the second mountain. And the second mountain is the mountain of destiny. Now, this second mountain is hugely different than the first mountain. Richard Rohr, again, calls this second mountain the further and fantastic journey. He says that the first mountain, this is just the warm-up act. The first mountain is the warm-up act. The second mountain is the mountain that when you find it and you start climbing it, that's when life starts to make a lot more sense. David Brooks, and I got this illustration, the two mountains, from David Brooks, his book called The Second Mountain. He suggests that the first mountain is about acquisition, whereas the second mountain is about contribution. He said the first mountain is about building up your ego, and the second mountain is about building up the ego and defining yourself, whereas the second mountain is about shedding the ego and losing the self. I thought of it this morning this way. The first mountain is about you. The second the mountain is about others or the world. That's a big, and you know what I realized this morning? The second mountain, if we want to give a one-word description of the second mountain other than destiny, we could call it love. The second mountain is about love, and love in the deepest, most protracted sense of love, where it is my self-giving on behalf of another. This transition from the first mountain to the second mountain is probably one of the most massive switches a person can make, because now your primary focus is not you, it's on others. When you get to the second mountain, you're no longer interested in what other people think you should be. You are now interested in the ways that you can contribute to others and what God thinks you should be. When you get to the second mountain, well, on the first mountain you want things. I want things. There's nothing wrong with that. On the second mountain, you want the things that are worth wanting. It is no longer about the self, it's about the calling. Now, the question is it possible to discover this? I mean, if that's true, is this some sort of generalized, just live your life with purpose? No, I would suggest to you it's something very specific. Like I said with the Dallas Willard quote, you are placed in a very specific context to count in ways that no one else does because you're so unique. So can we discover it? That's the big question. And honestly, it's what I'm now giving most of my life to, is answering that question. Can it be discovered? And I believe that the answer is yes. And I don't know how long any of you guys have been. I know many of you. I don't know how long you've been around Grace, but you've seen me talk about this. If you have, you've seen me talk about this a lot. Destiny can be discovered at the intersection of two massive truths. And I think this is on the next page of your workbook. All right, so truth number one is the awesome truth. Truth number two is the awful truth. Truth number one, I've already been alluding to, is about you. You are unique. By the way, if no one has said this to you already today, let me just tell you, you are a masterpiece. You are wonderful. By the way, you look great today. You're all put together. I'm impressed. So you are wonderful, and that is an awesome truth. Now, in a few minutes, or actually a few minutes, the rest of our time together through the month of March, we're going to unpack you. You're going to spend time after today. This is introductory. After today, you're going to spend the next 3 weeks thinking only about you. And that's perfectly fine, because it's important to understand this truth of your uniqueness. Ephesians 2:10 says, you are God's masterpiece, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for you to do. That's freaky, to think that your calling was prepared in advance, like before you were born. Think about that. Let that blow your mind. Before you were born, God said, I like this one. I like her. She's amazing. I don't just love her, I like her. And I've got something in mind for her in this life. A second mountain for her to climb that is about others. Stunning to me. That's the awesome truth. So we're going to unpack your life story. That'll be next week. We're going to talk about your personality. We'll talk about the Enneagram, how God made you. We'll talk about your unique skills and talents and gifts that you've picked up along the way, or maybe some of them were innate. And then finally, we'll talk about what burns in your heart. What is your passion? And all of those four elements of your life define the awesome truth of who you are. The awful truth is about the nature of our world. It is broken. I believe it's broken. The way I would define it, it's broken in six unique ways. First, injustice. As a matter of fact, I'll just go ahead and write these. Injustice. Injustice could be how many things? It could poverty, homelessness, abortion, massive illnesses worldwide that are taking vast swaths. What the world is going through right now with COVID. Injustice, so these big, huge swaths of wrongness in the world. I stood on this dubious, I'm going to call it an honor, because it was a weird honor to actually take in the pain of others as I stood on mass graves in South Africa in the height of the AIDS crisis. And at that time, it was so bad in South Africa, they lost an entire generation of moms and dads. They all died. And they were so poor that they couldn't afford funerals. So what they ended up doing was putting the bodies in dump trucks, taking them to a mass grave and dumping them into the mass grave, piling dirt on them. Or sometimes they would, I saw these long trenches. They actually look like the size of this platform here. and they would stack the bodies in there. And I stood on those mass graves praying over them. It was breathtaking. While I was there, it was one of those days after we prayed on the mass graves, we went to a village, and I saw kids at 3 o'clock in the afternoon lining up for their one meal a day. All their parents were dead, and some young man, his name was Sianda, 23 years old, went out and would every day scrounge for food to feed the kids in his village. So when I talk about injustice, that's what I'm thinking of. Or think of the homeless situation, or you think of human trafficking, or the millions of abortions. Injustice is one of the broken places of the world. Isolation is another broken place of the world. Now, talking about isolation in the past, when we look at the past 9 months, I think we understand what it is. But there are people who are perpetually in a state of isolation. Think about how frustrating it has been for you to hunker down and not be around people as much as you normally do in the last 9 months. Now imagine that there are people that are like that every day of their lives, virus or not. Isolation, which really is another way, I guess, of saying loneliness and not. You know that 50%, 1 out of every 2 Americans will tell you that they have no meaningful in-person interactions and that they feel lonely a lot of the time. 1 out of 2 Americans. Isolation is a big problem. And the impact of isolation is profound. People who are lonely have much higher blood pressure. They have much higher rates of cardiovascular disease. They have much higher rates of dementia, depression, reduced. If you are lonely, you get sicker because it reduces your immunity. Inflammation, you don't sleep as well. I'm telling you, isolation is a thing, and it's a big thing. Then, something that probably doesn't need a whole lot of discussion, but hatred. Racism, bigotry, discrimination, intolerance, tribalism. We are swimming upstream against the onrushing river of hatred in our country right now and around the world. And it starts with an us and them, like I'm me and you're you, and you're different than me. And I prefer not to be with people who are different from me, so I'll just hang out with people who are like me. And, I'm suspicious of people who are not like me because I don't get you. Well, that grows into segregation. Not only do I not want, I'm going to purposely separate myself and make sure that I'm never around people like you. And then in time, that takes an angry edge to it, and segregation becomes bigotry. Not only you not like me, but I don't like you. And then eventually that leads to dehumanization, because the only way we can deal with our bigotry and feel okay about it is to think that you, the one that I'm bigoted against, are less than me. And we dehumanize. And that is the heart of hatred in the world and has been forever. Then there's pain. Pain, again, in the middle of this 500,000 people dead. We know what pain is all about: heart disease, dementia, cancer, diabetes, chronic discomfort. I would guess if we went around the circle right now, or anybody watching right now, and I ask you what kind of chronic pain are you dealing with, somebody would say, I've got headaches, I've got intestinal issues, I've got breathing problems, I can't. And there's lots of pain in the world, but it's not just physical pain. 1 out of every 4 Americans suffer from mental illness in a given year, and half of those people never seek treatment. Students today, teenagers, I just read another article in the New York Times about the level of depression and anxiety in students, and you know this with your kids. You know, even with little kids, how they're struggling. The fact of the matter is, students today are the emotional, mental equivalent. Most students today are the equivalent of students who were institutionalized in 1950. So the idea of depression and anxiety as an ongoing reality, it's just become endemic. Pain is bad. Then we have decay of the planet. climate change, species extinction, global warming, pollution, plastics in the ocean. It's worse and worse and worse, and somewhere, I'm just going to get to preaching here, but I'm telling you, even in the Christian culture, where we have this Christian idea that all the world's going to burn up someday, and so why care about the world? The Christians have not led the way in understanding the need of the creation to be cared for. And it's time for Christians to stand up and say, this is the world God created, and I will be a steward. Anyway, I'll stop preaching on that. We'll get to that some other time. But the fact of the matter is the decay of the planet is a broken place. And finally, and I could start with this one because it is the foundation of all the other broken places. I used to call it separation. I now call it alienation. People are alienated in two ways. They're spiritually alienated from God. It's the great lack, the great hole. It's that ruthless human obsession to find something that the Christ, Jesus the Christ, it's like he is around us and in us, and we desire him, but we don't know where to find him. I mean, the series that Barry and Tim are going through right now about the credibility gap is really indicating, I think, and showing in a significant way how this issue of alienation is worse than it's ever been, and the credibility of the gospel and the credibility of the church and credibility of Christians are actually contributing to the alienation of people from God. But it's not just alienation of people from God. I learned a new word, a new pandemic word that I had never heard before. It's anomie, A-N-O-M-I-E. And it means to be alienated from norms. From the norms that you understood to be the normal way life works. And what the pandemic has done has brought this sense of anomie over people. Yes, they're alienated from God, but many people are alienated from the things that they held on to as life definitions. And things have been turned upside down. And as a result of that, they feel they have no mooring. They have no anchor at all in their life. And this is one of the reasons why people turn to extreme things like conspiracies or ultra groups, because they're looking for something to cling to as something that will help me understand what's normal. So people are alienated. And these are the broken places of the world. Now, the point is this. Where these two intersect, the brokenness of the world, which, by the way, the healing of the brokenness in the world is going to come through love, right? The extension of myself on behalf of another or the world. Where that is intersected with your uniqueness. But have I told you how wonderful you are? How many times do I need to remind you of that? You're wonderful, you're special. And I love it when you smile. I love it when people smile, because I think that, A, you're paying attention, that's good. And B, we all need to smile and know how special we are. You are. Okay, so where they intersect, that is your... All right. Now, Kara, can I have a few more minutes? All right. I got to go through a definition of words. This should be on the next page. Job, career, role, calling, destiny, legacy. All right. Job, here we go. I'm going to go fast and furious here. Job is that which you do or anyone does that brings in income. Some people like their job, some people don't like their job. Some people are good at their jobs, some people are not good at their jobs, but it brings in income. Career, oh, by the way, how does calling intersect with job? Career is essentially a series of jobs strung together over a period of time in a specific area. A career in retail sales, a career in medicine, a career in sports, a career in whatever. Again, intersects with calling in one of three ways. Now, role. I want you to listen really careful about what I'm going to say right now, because knowing why you exist as real moms, I want to make sure that I'm clear about this. A role are the crucial relationships that are in your life. I believe they're God-given, and I believe they are as important as calling, but they're different than calling. I want to make sure you hear me say that. The role you play as a mom, the role I play as a grandfather, these are absolutely essential roles, and there are people who count on us. I've been given the responsibility to nurture my family as a father, as a husband, as a grandfather. You've been given the responsibility to nurture your family. They are crucial, but they are not necessarily your calling. Roles are important, but they're not necessarily your calling. And I'll point this out to you. The number of young women that I've talked to over the years who are here in this valley of bewilderment because their kids went to school. And all of a sudden, that thing that they believe was, this is my calling, is to raise these children and protect these children. This is the call of God in my life. And then they go off to school and they don't need that as much anymore. And there's this crisis. That's because your calling is something, it can intersect with your role, but it's unique. Okay, job, career, role. Calling then is this. If you just look at me, I'll show you what a calling is. It's this. It's a summons. Now I believe it comes from God. God saying, I have something for you. I'm calling you to something. It is always, always, always about other people. Now, by the last week, we're going to talk about passions. Passions inflame calling. Passions point to calling. But watch this. What if you say, I'll tell you one of my passions is cooking. Okay? I love to cook. But it's not my calling. It is my hobby. A passion that's focused on my benefit is a hobby. A passion that's focused on other people's benefits is a calling. A passion focused on me is a hobby. A passion focused on other people is a calling. Destiny. Destiny is your calling on steroids. It is, all of you here are too young to be talking about destiny. We should be talking about calling with you. For Linda and me, it's a little different story. We should be talking about destiny because the older you get, we get to the point in our life where it's not just calling, it is a destination. It is this calling that has almost matured with us and gotten more specific with us. Now, of course, we're going to talk about destiny because when you discover your calling, you're on the way to discover your destiny. I did this once here live on stage with a young man, and he kept telling me, I want to know my destiny. I think he was like 30 years old. I said, I can't tell you. He said, no, you're just going to have to show me. And I said, dude, you're too young. Give it a couple of more decades and we'll talk about destiny. But for now, what is your calling? So calling and destiny, they're related. And finally, and I told you I was going to tell you the three ways these intersect, and then we'll bring this to a close. Legacy is essentially when you're involved in loving and healing the world, you're establishing a legacy that follows you. The more you engage your calling, the deeper your legacy. The more you pursue your destiny, the more the legacy grows behind you. Now, there are three ways that calling intersects job and career, and this is really important. When I do coaching with people, one-on-one coaching, this is inevitably where we end up because they want to know. There are three ways that calling intersect job. One, they don't. They're distinct. Like you're in retail sales, but your calling is ending food insecurity, right? Well, that's okay. Because you might like your sales job, and you're good at your sales job, and it brings in the money to finance your calling. Okay? You know the Apostle Paul, the great missionary, the first great missionary of all time, he made tents. He was a tent maker. And that brought in income for him to go do his calling. That's the first way they don't intersect. The second way is that they touch. Something of your, I'll give you, here's a story. A guy I walked through the process discovered his calling had to do, he's a deep mentor. He's a mentor par excellence. He just catalyzes people. But he was the president of a software company. But he discovered, wait, this mentoring I do, if I could use this with my employees and even with some of my customers, he was able to take his calling and intersected his job, and it enhanced both. And finally, either they don't relate at all, or they touch, or they become one and the same. Vocational calling. And at some point you realize, I can't do anything else but this. That's where you invest yourself 100%, and your job, your career, and your calling completely merge. All right, that's the introductory stuff. Finally, and then I'll leave you alone, the end product we're looking for is the establishment and the completion of your calling quilt. And we won't get to this till next week, but the calling quilt is essentially, you know what everyone have a quilt probably, or you know what a quilt looks like. Everybody, grandma, you know, my daughter has a T-shirt quilt. It's really ugly. Okay, I'm sorry, she doesn't mind. Actually, she probably does mind. But if you looked at that, she had taken the T-shirt and cut out the logo part of every T-shirt, and each one was a patch. So you can stand back and look at my daughter's T-shirt quilt, and you can say, oh, she was in a sorority at IU. Oh, she liked athletics. Oh, she was in music. Oh, she was in drama. And you get the whole picture of her life. The same is true of you. And over the next 3 weeks, we're going to put all the patches of your life, all your life story, your personality traits, your skills, your gifts, and your passions. And then when we're done at the end of the month, we're going to I'm going to help you connect the dots. And from that mystical looking at your whole life, we're going to arrive at perhaps that which you were called to be in this world. And I look forward to going there with you over the next 3 weeks. All right? Ready to go? We'll see you next week. Yeah, the homework assignment, would you turn to the page Capturing Your Life Story. Your homework assignment is essentially to fill in these blanks. Who have been the most important positive people in your life? Who have been the negative people? What are the positive circumstances, moments, and seasons? The negative. What communities, groups, teams, organizations? Now, turn to the next page. Here's this is an easier way to go about it. Just answer these questions. That's your homework. Who are the positive mentors and significant people? Just fill this all out, and then I'll show you how we're going to map it on your calling quilt for next week. All right, there we go.